Long before Undertale revolutionized the gaming scene with its deconstruction of RPG tropes, another game laid the foundation with its own deconstruction, satire, and meta-narrative in RPGs. Released on the PlayStation 1 in 1997 by Love to Leak, a small gaming studio featuring several Square alumni, this game boldly challenged the traditional conventions and formulas of the RPG genre at a time where RPGs were at their peak in popularity. This was the year of Final Fantasy VII, a game that catapulted RPGs into the mainstream the world over, thereby bringing about an RPG renaissance on the Sony PlayStation. To that end, Moon acts as a bold challenge, asking players to step back and question why it is the hero travels the land, slaying foes, breaking into people's houses to loot through their belongings, and so much more. And until 2021, it was a Japanese exclusive. Yet despite that exclusivity, Toby Fox not only described this game as a foundational title in shaping Undertale's identity, but also had a significant hand in its eventual localization on the Switch and later the PC and PlayStation consoles, as revealed in an interview with the game's writer, Yoshiro Kimura. And on a more personal level, it's a game that's intrigued me as a fan of meta-narrative in video games and the unique ways the fourth wall and deconstruction can make for a thoughtful reflection and player immersive experience. So, in this video, I'd like to give my thoughts and first impressions of this game, having played the first 3 hours as a sort of precursor to a larger video on meta-narratives I'd like to make at a later date. When you first open Moon Remix RPG Adventure, you're greeted to a charming, sketchy cutscene that feels like something out of a child's sketchbook, where a little boy sits down to play an RPG. This transitions us straight into your traditional text scroll prelude that you'd see in many older RPGs, such as the original 2D Final Fantasies. However, this text scroll very quickly shows its true purpose, with the text flying by so fast you can barely keep up, and getting so lengthy and over the top that it's clear that this is all part of the joke. It's juxtaposed with deeply detailed sprites akin to the SNES-era Final Fantasies. And then we're dropped into the game. The prologue is generic in a word, but that's very much by design. The sprite work on the overworld is fairly crude, and the music is incredibly repetitive and grating. NPCs give very shallow dialogue, cheering on the hero in his quest to defeat the dragon. As you explore the town, NPCs gladly let you take their legendary armor and loot their homes. Overworld sprites and portraits are deeply dissonant, and the battles you experience feel like an extremely stripped-down version of Dragon Quest, where all you can do is watch combat play out. Your first encounter is what seems like a monstrous or rabid dog troubling the town, with a cartoonishly over-the-top sprite and a comedic feel that matches the wackiness of the enemy designs in Dragon Quest and something like Earthbound's more mundane encounters. It's essentially distilling the turn-based RPG to its most bare-bones formula, stripping away any unique gameplay and presentation elements, such as the ATB system in the SNES-era Final Fantasies, or the enemy positioning and dual text of Chrono Trigger, just to name two iconic examples from the previous generation. In addition to the dog, you'll battle slimes, and the strange creature that an innocent girl begs you to slay despite it chilling right beside her. This adventure is also broken into small segments, advancing through the greater game to give a taste of what the story is about and setting up key events, like the hero donning the legendary armor and passing beneath a rainbow archway. He soars into the sky to fight an amalgamation of different monsters and later do battle with the evil dragon for the fate of the world, and then his mother tells him to shut off the game and go to bed, and we're met with the familiar sketchy style from before. In short, this game within the game is just a way to set the stage. It lays out several key moments with a teasing, sarcastic tone, and while it's easy to mistake it as an attack on RPGs, I see it as more of a loving tribute with a humorous edge. At this point, the turn-based RPG conventions were a well-worn glove, and while many games within this genre are among the best video games out there, Moon seeks to challenge and unpack the established tropes. As someone who has played a lot of turn-based RPGs, I personally loved how meta this entire segment was. It came across as a cheap rush experience. An RPG without the time, care, and polish of the greats, but with an unabashed willingness to laugh at itself and bring you along for the ride. It reminds me a lot of how Undertale pokes fun at tutorials in the ruins through Flowey's bait-and-switch and Toriel's literal hand-holding, or how DDLC starts off with this bright, cheery visual novel/dating sim format only to show its true colors later. In many regards, Moon follows a similar setup as the real game begins. When the protagonist falls asleep, his spirit ends up in the world of the game, but things are decidedly different. The visuals are less cheap and saturated, instead taking on a more stylized and sketchy look. When you first arrive, a group of NPCs discuss the situation, but where before the NPC dialogue was stiff and shallow, these NPCs now feel more alive. They voice dissenting opinions, worry about the future, and get the sense that these are people with actual lives. This will be a recurring aspect of the game. Early on, you can't directly interact with people, but you can explore the town and hear what they have to say. You'll also see the hero from before, though now he carries himself with slow, imposing footsteps and an intimidatingly large sword. When you first explore the town, you can see him chasing after an innocent dog, which was an enemy encounter in the prologue segment. Here, though, it really is just a pet being wrongfully antagonized. One of my Twitch chatters pointed out how the prologue comes across as the hero's view of the world, more stripped down and gamey, and I think that's incredibly likely. It's the player experiencing the RPG on its most bare-bones level, which makes me think of Flowey and Undertale and how he grew more and more disillusioned with the world of the game, losing a personal attachment. It wouldn't surprise me if Toby channeled some of this into his own writing, nor would it surprise me if this sort of disengagement and focusing on mechanics was the intent with Moon's prologue. The NPCs even remark about the hero's reckless antics and the way he's chasing around that poor dog. Where the prologue NPCs offered saccharine support, these NPCs are much more uncertain and far more alive. It's not until you leave town and meet a kindly old lady that your options open up. Mistaking you for her deceased grandchild, she gives you some clothes, and with these clothes, you make like Rayman and become a mess of floating parts, with the simple task of bringing her bread. Now, here's where Moon gets a bit more complicated. See, the game offers you a very simple manual that you can pull up at any time with the press of a button. This goes over the base mechanics, including the game's timer. At the top of the screen, there's a meter that tells you the day of the week and the time of day. When I first got into the action, I vastly overestimated the time limit, which is at first so strict that you don't really have the luxury to look around and explore. Really, the best way to get your bearings is to go to the full manual, which you can access through the game's website. This manual gives a much more thorough breakdown of the mechanics of the game, and will save you a lot of trouble, especially when it comes to understanding the in-game timer. Run out of time and you're sent back to the title screen and must pick off where you last slept, his beds act as save points. This is not unlike One-Shot. Not realizing I could just pick up from that save point, I ended up having to play through the entire prologue again, but my chatters helped me figure things out, and I successfully delivered the bread to her. I also learned the fact that eating your grandma's cookies will extend your stamina. All food items will, which is extremely crucial in the early game, where your time and mobility is limited. The good news is, it doesn't stay that way. Upon delivering the bread, you obtain your first little bit of love, which acts as Moon's primary form of experience. Upon sleeping, you're greeted by a mysterious character rendered in an extremely charming claymation style, who gives you your mission: spread love throughout the land and save the creatures mercilessly slain by the so-called hero. If you're kind to others, if you give love, then you'll get love in return. As Toby himself stated in his tweets, this concept was very foundational in Undertale's own deconstruction of levels in EXP. But it's not just the concept of love that inspired Toby, but also Moon's satire and deconstruction of RPG encounters and killing monsters. As you experience Moon's world, you'll find monsters slaughtered all over the map, also rendered in claymation. What's so cool about the clay figures is that they were created from real clay and then photographed and converted into pre-rendered sprites using stop motion rather than the 3D modeling that was common at the time. The good news is, you have the power to save these adorable creatures. As one of the game's NPCs, Dr. Dolotl gives you your mission. He chastises the so-called hero for slaughtering innocent animals for experience points, as though the very notion is ludicrous. And this stands in stark contrast to the town's local news celebrating the hero's progress. The good news is, you have the power to undo the hero's crimes and save those animals' souls. All you have to do is find them and catch them, and the formerly felled creatures will revive and get whisked away by a helpful flying saucer. In doing so, you not only gain love, but currency that you can use to stock up on food and buy other useful items such as a fishing rod for a future quest. While it's not quite the same as engaging in battles where you use specific commands to befriend enemy monsters, each monster has their own unique bestiary page that reveals unique quirks about their behavior that can aid you in capturing them. Some are rather simple, and you can catch them by approaching their ghosts on the overworld with no trouble. Others will flee if you approach them too carelessly, or require you to travel great distances between the corpse and the spirit, or fulfill some other condition. For instance, there's a spirit of a plant that plays harp music, but its body is in the flower shop. In order to save it, you must heed Flora's words and go to the rainbow rocks where she uncovered its body, then return to her shop to guide the spirit home. You also can't save the souls of any animals you haven't identified yet, forcing you to scour the land to find their bodies. These more complicated quests help keep the core gameplay loop from being too stale, even if it can be tricky when playing totally blind. While some may lament the lack of a battle system, I think the lack of combat strengthens Moon's themes and deconstructive nature. This is perhaps the first game of its kind, asking you to stop, think, and feel for the enemies who would otherwise be EXP fodder in any other RPG, by turning the act of saving them and showing compassion for the people in the world into a new form of experience. The more animals you save, the more love you gain, which in turn lets you level up each time you sleep and save. I found that saving animals was the most efficient way to rack up love in a short span of time, which was especially important when I had little time to work with. And time is a very big component of Moon as well, as the NPCs act on set schedules which vary not only based on time of day, but also the day of the week. In that respect, it's not unlike Majora's Mask, the key difference being that instead of a 3-day cycle, you have your stamina to take into account. Still, once I started gaining enough levels, I finally got to explore the game's other systems. For instance, one helpful NPC told me to talk to the king, but during the mornings the king was too busy feeding his birds to sit and chat. Thus, I had to wait until the afternoon before I could head inside, have a nice conversation, and gain his business card, as well as that of his advisor. Those business cards then opened up new systems of NPC interaction. By presenting an NPC with a given character's card or other identifying items, you can learn more about their relationships to each other, or perhaps kickstart new quests. Meeting with the NPCs, getting to know them, and solving their problems not only gives the world so much life, but it also lets you, the player, form more meaningful connections with them. For instance, the palace guard Bilby visits a nearby pub at night. If you go there, you can learn a bit more about him that you'd never learn if you spoke to him on duty. Surprise! He's a divorced father. The barkeep, Wanda, also used to be beautiful and slender by her own admission, though she hasn't let her change of figure get her too down, and remains a hospitable host for troubled souls late at night. As for the king, he hides a mysterious message on the back of his card, asking you to visit his chambers at night when his minister isn't around. This is the first real taste of friction between the two, and our first look at the king's hidden depths. Successfully visit him after hours, and a downright whimsical side of him shines forth, as he shares his grand plans to save the world and improve the kingdom in colorful crayon drawings. His biggest priority is flying to the moon for research purposes with his friend Dr. Hager, but as the two have fallen out of contact, he tasks you with delivering a message. The only problem is that in order to reach Hager, you must first gain access to his scientific facilities, which requires a lot of money that I didn't have at the time. And so all the gameplay systems link together in a cohesive whole. You need to save animals to get money, and gain love to gain more time. And by helping NPCs, you can also gain love, which extends your timer further and grants you greater mobility, while giving you a new means to interact with the people of the world. Catching and saving animals definitely can be challenging. Some are shy, some require you to drop coins in a fountain. Thankfully, the game provides a method to track your progress once you unlock your own house by way of a TV show. Along the way, you'll see the real versions of the hero's antics. For instance, the legendary armor from the prologue is really just a woman's stolen bra and underwear, and the Rainbow Arch is a laser activated through a simple puzzle to clear a pathway, while the hero simply takes advantage of your work like the fraud that he is. A lot of the fun in my first few hours was seeing how the prologue tied into the real meat of the game, and experiencing the hero's quest through the eyes of the ordinary people. By the point I left off, I'd yet to see the real version of the hero's encounter with that little girl and the creature beside her, let alone the true form of that amalgamated monster near the end. I already have my suspicions of what its true form is, but just in case anyone here wants to try the game for themselves, I'll leave it for you all to ruminate on, should you join me on this journey. Still, even if I've only made it a fraction of the way into the game, there's already so much charm oozing from every sprite, every background, and the overall cozy atmosphere despite the slaughtered animals dotting the land. It gives the game's satire some sincerity, which, like Toby's games, it questions RPG conventions but in a more constructive fashion by creating something new and unique and inviting you along for the ride. While I've yet to complete Moon Remix RPG Adventure, the little I've played is just so genuinely captivating. You can see so much of Undertale's inspirations here, from the way the game challenges traditional RPG combat and conventions, to how much the game breathes life into what would otherwise be faceless plot-dumping NPCs. The in-game bestiaries remind me so much of Undertale's check texts, with how they serve as clues for how to save the animals. Combine that with the hero's killing spree being so reminiscent of Undertale's murder run, and in a way, it kind of feels like you're witnessing that sort of run from the perspective of a civilian. And this was almost 20 years before Undertale released and took the world by storm, so I genuinely think Moon deserves way more credit and recognition for laying a foundation for Toby's breakout hit. True, the Mother series inspired Undertale's art direction, quirky sense of humor, and overall vibes, but where meta-narrative and deconstruction are concerned, Moon stands shoulder to shoulder with Off as creative influences. More importantly, this game's existence is such a bold statement. As mentioned, the PS1 was the primary home of RPGs in its console generation, seeing a slew of games localized at a rate far greater than the previous console generation, and for a brief time, there were plans to localize Moon on its original console that sadly fell through. Games like Final Fantasy, Legend of Dragoon, Grandia, Dragon Quest VII, Suikoden, Lunar, and so many others found their home here and were beloved classics. Moon never said these games shouldn't exist, yet with the base convention so standardized, it challenged players to look at the genre from a brand new angle and, arguably, challenged the overall violent nature of games that still persists to this day by making a game all about kindness a truly engaging experience. I look forward to continuing my playthrough in the future. If you'd like to follow along, I'll be linking my Twitch account in the description and displaying it on the end screen. My goal with this playthrough is to experience the full scope of Moon's meta-narrative so that I can include it in a much larger video I'm planning about meta-narrative and fourth wall breaking in video games. However, such a project will take quite some time, so if you'd like to support what I do so I have a bit more wiggle room with big projects, please consider heading over to my Patreon. You'll get work-in-progress scripts, audio recordings, video edits, concept art, and demo music tracks for various projects, and so much more, and in turn, you'll help me be a bit more stable, as the algorithm is a cruel beast, and not every video reaches a wider audience, especially when they cover other games. And please do check out Moon Remake's RPG Adventure if it even seems remotely interesting to you. I'll toss a link to the Steam page in the description, as well as the game's official website, which includes a more in-depth manual and lots of other cool information to enhance your experience. Definitely share your thoughts in the comments as well about meta-narrative in games, and what sort of games are standout examples to you. I can't guarantee I'll include them in the larger video, but it's always fun to hear what people think. With that being said, thanks so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.